Hi everyone, my name is Dimitri, and today I'm doing my first overview of an entire author. We're going to be talking about Jeffrey Eugenides, who I think is a nearly perfect author and severely underappreciated. We're going to talk about his 3 full-length novels. If it's your first time reading Eugenides, or if you haven't read him before, I hope to give you guys a good starter guide on how to read him. But if you have read Eugenides, I think you can also find in this video a deeper connection between all 3 of his novels and get some further insights in how they are connected and maybe what to read next in his catalog. Eugenides is often compared to his contemporaries. I think he's not nearly as pretentious or forcefully dense as David Foster Wallace. I think his books are also more consistently solid than authors like Dave Edgar's or Jonathan Safran Foer. I think Eugenides has a nearly perfect, I won't say perfect, book in all 3 of his novels. I think they are all worth reading, and they all have their own strengths and weaknesses, but mostly balanced out with more strengths. So where do you start? Well, most people start with this book. Most people recognize this book, Middlesex. Why is that? It won the Pulitzer Prize. It's a starting point for most people because of the critical and popular reception it received when it came out. I think it's an excellent starting point for some readers. I think this should be required reading for all Greek Americans. I think it really tackles the Greek American perspective in such a beautiful light, and something that I highly related with because I'm Greek, but also I think if you're coming from any immigrant background, you can relate to a lot of what's going on here. But there are just such beautiful specifics to Greek American culture, and I haven't seen it done so well in a novel format before. So Middlesex is excellent. The next book, this is not in chronological order. This is actually his debut novel, The Virgin Suicides. It's a little whitewashed there. Okay, there. It became a movie by Sofia Ford Coppola after the novel, and Jeffrey Eugenides was one of the co-writers for it. I think this book is a bit more accessible than the rest of his novels, but you can tell that it is a debut novel. And for most people that might be a negative thing, but for Jeffrey Eugenides somehow being a debut novel, it's still nearly perfect. This is the last book that I read of Eugenides. I read it this year, and it's probably my favorite book I've read in 2020 so far. So I still have high praise, even though this might be my least favorite of his 3 books. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. My personal favorite, and probably the least popular of his novels, is The Marriage Plot. And I'll talk about why that is a little bit later. I think this should be required reading for all English majors. He pokes fun at English majors a lot in this book, but he's one of us. And so I really like that characterization in there. So in interviews, Jeffrey Eugenides states that in his first novel, Virgin Suicides, he was trying to find his voice, trying to find a unique voice. In his second book, Middlesex, he was trying to master the art of plotting a book. And so this is a maybe overly plotted book, but it's very well crafted, and how all these stories, it follows 3 generations, interweave with each other. It's a very complex plotting. And then in his last book, his most recent book, The Marriage Plot, he focuses on character development. And so you can tell with each reading how he's developing as a writer, and how that focus is influencing the entire book and the effect on their reader. So Virgin Suicides, unique voice, that's what it's got going for itself. It's told in the first person plural, which I can't name any other books off the top of my head that are written in that voice. First person plural versus means you get a narrator that is speaking as a we. We saw this, we felt this, we're telling you this. It's told from the perspective of boys that lived in Detroit and their classmates, these 5 sisters, maybe a stand-in for the five muses from ancient Greek mythology. These five sisters all commit suicide while they're still in high school, and this traumatizes the boys. And we see the effect of trauma on the boys, but we also see how the boys fawned over these girls while they were alive, and maybe even more so after they died. It's a parable. It's a metaphor for the ending of the American dream, the destruction of Detroit as a city. It used to be this incredibly wealthy car industry city, and then the car industry moved out and really destroyed the city. I think there's a line in here that it is a foreshadowing for what's going to happen to the rest of America. That the Lisbon girls, the girls that commit suicide, were just predicting what was going to be happening later on in the country. What else did I want to say? While the plot wanders a little bit, the plotting is maybe its weak point, and we see that he tries to fix that in Middlesex by overly plotting a book. The seductive lyricism of the prose just draws you in consistently throughout the novel. It is just, he finds his voice in such a beautiful way, and there's just such beautiful lines, and it's excellent. And I think when comparing it to the movie, which I always think is dangerous and well, maybe a pointless argument comparing books to movies, the movie actually, I think, captures the tone of this novel exceptionally well. However, just because the lines in this novel are so lyrical and so beautiful, you want to reread them, you want to pause and really take them in, and then when you hear it through sound and it's just passed over, or you're distracted by something else while the voiceover is happening, I think it loses its impact. And so I think the book's a little bit more impactful in that sense. But you get a good idea with the movie. Alright, so his next book, he wanted to focus on plotting, and that's what he does. Middlesex is an exceptionally crafted story. It follows 3 generations of a Greek family as they move from Turkey to America. The title is Middlesex, which is the name of the city where the family moves to in America. But the book is, the title is a play on words, but the book is about being caught in the middle of so many different things. So at first the family is caught in the middle. They are Greeks from Turkey, which is where my family's from. We're Greeks from Turkey. And feeling in the middle of 2 cultures there. They're not really in their home country, but if they went to Greece, they wouldn't feel home there either. And so they moved to America because of a lot of things. We can call it genocide. That was occurring in Turkey. The Armenian genocide was happening. There was also a Hellenic genocide at the same time. So they moved to America, and they are caught in the middle of American society. They are immigrants in America, so they're not fully American, but they're not fully Greek either anymore, right? And then the 3rd generation is from the perspective of Cal, or Calliope. And Calliope is intersex. He was born with both genitals without knowing, and so it's being caught in between these 2 sexes. Honestly, this book, before reading this book, I didn't know too much about intersex people, but 1 in 2,000 people in the world are intersex. And so I teach at a high school of 2,000 students, and so 1 has to, just by statistics, 1 maybe is intersex, but a lot of people just don't know that they are. So tackles a lot of really interesting things with gender in this book, with being caught in the middle. That's the joke, or it's probably not a joke. But that's the pun with the Middlesex title. This is what won the Pulitzer Prize, very well deserved. Most people read this book, don't read other things by Eugenides, but I think that's okay. I think this is probably his most important book, although it's not my favorite. My favorite is his most recent book, The Marriage Plot. In this book, he had mastered voice, moved on. He had mastered plotting and moved on. I think what was lacking a little bit in Middlesex was character development. And there were some great characters in here, but then some characters kind of fell flat, or we didn't see their narrative arc, or their stories just ended just abruptly and randomly. And so he goes, I think, to fix that issue with The Marriage Plot, and I think this is his most fully realized book. It's also, I think, his least appreciated, but it's definitely my favorite. I think it beautifully captures the feeling of what it feels to fall in love towards the end of college, and not really have any idea of what you want to do or who you are. And that's such a unique time in someone's life, and I think he really tells it really well through the eyes of three characters. It captures a feeling of feeling in love without really understanding what love is, which most young people don't know what love is, and lots of adults still don't. And with that vulnerability of feeling in love but not really understanding what that feeling is, or if what you have is an appropriate format of a love. There's a really beautiful quote in here that just I think captured how a lot of people, maybe myself, felt towards the end of college. Someone says to the main female protagonist, who is the English major, how attractive it can be to think you can save somebody else by loving them. That, someone else might have their issues, but if you just love them hard enough, they will figure it out. And I think that's something that a lot of people fall into a trap when they get into relationships. They think they can fix someone else. And I think he, through a lot of different characters, grapples with that thought and that feeling. And he doesn't delegitimize that feeling, but I think he asks bigger questions surrounding it. I think a critique that most people have is that it's a little bit more dense and pretentious than his other works. I still think it's very accessible. He makes really high concepts very accessible to the reader. That's just my perspective. He talks about Barth, specifically his book, A Lover's Discourse, and I picked this up after I finished The Marriage Plot because I love this book so much. And this book is centrally focused with Bart and with A Lover's Discourse. The main protagonist in this novel is writing her dissertation, I think, on Bart and on A Lover's Discourse, and it influences how she's looking at her relationship that she's in and other relationships in her life. Bart is a semiotician. He studies symbols, which are not just language, but all types of symbols. And in this book, he studies how love can be understood through different symbols and symbology, and through focusing on different words. I highly recommend this book too. It was a lot of fun, but it is dense. So I think that is the major critique with The Marriage Plot, but it is, like I said, my favorite, and I think it's his most realized. So in summary, I think Eugenides is a nearly perfect author. He's definitely one of my favorites, and that's not just because I'm Greek and I was an English major. He's an author that started with a nearly perfect book, The Virgin Suicides, and he's improved his writing ability with every iteration, with every new novel. He spends about 8 to 10 years on each novel, and I think it really shows. He's not just pumping out weak plots or weak characters. He's really pouring his soul and his heart into these works, and for that I think he deserves the recognition that he has had, but I think we will learn to appreciate him more in our culture as his novels mature. So that's it. Happy reading. Talk to you guys soon.